All right, Congressman, thanks for letting me tag along. So where are we right now, and what is the plan for today?
So we're in Elk River right now, just outside of the TFR. So Biden's decided after 4+ days that he now wants to go ahead and tour and visit the area. But unfortunately, when they set up these TFRs, which is essentially a restriction zone, that prevents any of the helicopters or any of the actual pit capabilities to rescue and resupply. This area is outside of the TFR, so we can get into Banner Elk and a couple of other areas, as well as we're tying in with the Emergency Management Center and the EOC, so that we can see exactly where they have deployed SAR teams and where they're still getting calls and reports. So we're going to drop supplies here, which you can see kind of to the left of me. We just did a drop in Burnsville, splitting off the two assets for the other helicopter. Burnsville, another area that was hit pretty hard, especially around Cello. Yesterday, we actually hit quite a few areas, everything from Broad River Fire Department, which saw about 64 inches of flooding that came into the fire department itself within a 30-minute time span. Grew into the fire trucks, but also just caused massive damage down the river area. So you're seeing that from Broad River to Cello to Burnsville to Poplar. Asheville we did on the first day, we've dropped. But in the CASA that we just brought in, this makes over the last 3 days approximately 5 tons of supplies, over 10,000 pounds of water, food, non-perishables, diapers. And also we're delivering things like Starlink systems in the area so that people can report back to their families, which will reduce the number of missing persons, which will also make the SAR rescues able to focus on areas that are actually in need. So again, right now we're being told about 160 plus fatalities. I think that number is definitely going to increase as we've now gotten outside of that 96-hour window, where you will go from transitioning in many cases in the next, I would say, few days, unfortunately, from more about body recovery than it is for rescues. So we're just going to continue to try and look at the areas that are most hit, work with the EOC, Executive Management Centers, work with the fire departments, and then also continue to coordinate with other groups and organizations that are here to try and help as much as possible where we can.
And so, you've been here for a little bit. What has been your impression of the federal response, and what have the locals that you've talked to, what has their been impression of the response from the federal government?
Well, look, I think that it's obvious that FEMA has continued to drop the ball. I look at this as partly a result of privatization of DEI or meritocracy within this administration, but I also look at what this administration did to the disaster management kind of group, if you will, within FEMA, where they were utilizing FEMA to really respond to things like Maui, like Palestine, Ohio, like Florida, like South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee when it comes to these massive storms that's come in. But now they're peeling off a large percentage of this, over $900 million plus that's going towards immigration resettlement, which is outside of what their actual scope should be. Look, myself, my other Florida colleagues, as well as for members of Hawaii and others, we ended up having to sign a discharge petition. It was called Discharge Petition 19 on the House floor in order to force a vote to refund the disaster relief fund. So we're seeing where the federal government has essentially been moot to this point. I mean, you're talking about nearly 4 days over that 96-hour period, and then 5-6 days plus. My days are running into each other before you've even had anyone from the administration try and visit the area and even do a flyover, which is actually hurting better more than it is helping. But again, I think that you're seeing where citizens are stepping up, and this isn't anything new to me. I mean, look, whether it was 2021 after the botched Afghan withdrawal, when we went over and conducted the first rescues of Americans that were being left behind, or first overland rescue, whether it was Israel, where literally days after the October 7th horrific incident, which we're getting ready to come up on the 1-year anniversary, we were able to get up 255 Americans out before the federal government did anything, or even recently this year in 2024 in Haiti, we were able to get 23 Americans and 59 mentally and physically disabled children relocated before the federal government raised a finger. This is becoming the status quo, not just a pattern of abandonment of Americans, but also a wrongful prioritization. The federal government needs to start prioritizing the 3 fundamentals of America, Americans, and American interest, and stop looking at every other geopolitical spectrum and saying that's what the priorities are 9,000 miles away, not our borders 900 miles away, not the people who are suffering right here in North Carolina or Tennessee. So again, I think this is down to a prioritization, and it's really an America Last agenda that we have to change. And I'm hoping that, I believe courage is contagious. I think that it's really, hopefully something that's encouraging other members when they're seeing me out here for days and days and days, that they're going to get involved as well. The senators, the local legislators, the local officials, and we work together, understanding that partisanship doesn't exist in times of disaster, and it shouldn't exist at all, but especially when it comes to prioritizing the American people.
And what's your main takeaway from being on the ground?
Look, I've seen areas that are really hard hit. You hear them all the time say, well, where's FEMA? Where's federal government? Where's this? We definitely need to do a better job. I can tell you that. The federal government, Reagan said it best, if you ever hear the words, I'm from the federal government, I'm here to help, that's usually the scariest words you'll ever hear. I'm a really big 10th Amendment guy. I believe in bringing things out of the federal government and back to the state and individual rights. I think that we've got multiple examples of the reasoning behind that and justification to do so. But I think that my biggest takeaway is that I've continued to see a series. I mean, look, Maui still hasn't been rebuilt. Palestine, Ohio, the same situation. Here in North Carolina, looking at the devastation around us, watching houses completely eliminated, children missing, people who had drowned trying to escape the flooding. And meanwhile, you've not really heard much of a response. But I also look at mainstream media as part of the problem too, where they're prioritizing the wrong things. We get more on some recent scandal than we do people suffering here that are dying. And so I think that we just have to do a better job to really truly serve the American people, be we the people, which is what our constitutional republic is about.